You know, folks, I got really tired of standing in the grocery aisle and looking at labels, trying to figure out what's good for me. That's why I have a membership to Thrive Market. Thrive Market is a membership-based grocery service where you can shop from wherever you are. All you got to do is hop on their app. The membership breaks down to $5 a month, and it gives members access to weekly sales, personalized shopping with filters, auto ship and save, free gifts, and peace of mind, knowing there's no junk in any of the products they carry. Instead of paying fees on every grocery delivery order, you pay once for the year and benefit from it every time you shop. My wife and I order a lot from Thrive Market. Her favorite is the Smash Foods Raspberry Superfood Fruit Spread. She loves it. Now, my favorite are the crisps from the Good Crisp Company, specifically sour cream and onion. They're amazing. The simple fact that I can shop specifically for high protein or low sugar through filters makes the membership a no-brainer for me. Thrive Market gives you versions of all the foods you love with less sugar, fewer sketchy ingredients, and more nutrition. Ready to make some healthy swaps and become a member? Join Thrive Market with our link, thrivemarket.com/TCAT for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 474 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm having a good week. You know, we put out the Thursday episode.
We did.
And also went up on YouTube, and we're getting a lot of great feedback about the studio, the new episode. So it's more work, but hey, people are liking it.
I'm glad. As long as they're happy, I'm happy.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Bruce Swicker.
Hey, S. Wicker.
Jack Glanville.
What's happening, Jack?
Sarah Woods.
Hey, there's Sarah.
Tammy Forkham.
Well, I said it on Patreon, if you can't fork them, spoon them.
Katie Armstrong.
What's going on, Katie?
Hunter Hoffman.
Hey, there's Hunter.
Casey P.
Well, thanks, Casey.
J Law.
Well, J Law.
And last but not least, Tara Henry.
Well, thank you, Henry.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Vicky Armstrong.
Well, thanks, Vicky. Are you related to Katie? I don't know. Same last name.
Two
maybe.
Armstrong. So we appreciate all the Patreon support that we get. We have an episode out right now on True Crime All the Time Unsolved where we're talking about Dottie Kaler. This is a fascinating case because her husband dropped her off at the train station, but there was no evidence that she ever boarded the train. And then she disappeared. And then things started to come out about the marriage. And obviously they looked at the husband because they're always going to.
That's what always happens. Things start to unravel.
Yeah, but he hit the radar pretty hard. And just to let everybody know, Thursday's episode is about a guy named Frank Freshwaters, which is maybe hard to say.
I'll say easy for you to say.
But this is a guy who hit somebody while speeding, pleaded guilty to manslaughter, but then escaped from an honor farm for 50 years.
It's a long time.
He was on the run for 50 years. So make sure you check that out. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time?
I am ready.
We got a big case. This is the 1989 kidnapping of 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling. He was kidnapped by a masked man from St. Joseph, Minnesota on October 22nd for 27 years. What happened to Jacob and who took him remained a mystery. The perpetrator was someone who had been on police radar since the early phases of the investigation. And we do see that, right?
We do.
First of all, mystery that is solved decades later. And then once you find out who it is, it can go one of two ways. Either that person wasn't on police radar at all, they kind of just surfaced out of the blue, or this person was looked at and thought of, they just couldn't put it together.
Yeah, they couldn't bring it home.
Jacob Aaron Wetterling was born on February 17th, 1989 in Long Prairie, Minnesota. He was the son of Jerry Lee Wetterling and Patricia Lynn King. Jacob was the second of 4 children. And, he was the kind of boy, Gibbs, that was said to have been nice to everyone. At his school, he loved fishing. He loved playing hockey. At the time of his death, he was in the 6th grade and was an A student.
Well, he grew up in Minnesota, so hockey, I'm not surprised.
No, me neither. Hockey is big in a lot of places now. When you and I were growing up here in Ohio, hockey was not a thing.
It was not.
I mean, it was a pro sport, but there was no high school hockey. Now it is. And even younger, like AAU teams and youth leagues and all that.
Oh, yeah. My little nephew, he plays hockey every Saturday morning at 7:00. Why my brother agreed to that?
That's very early for Saturday.
Exactly. But, he's good at it, for being, I think he's like 9 years old, 10 years old. I mean, that's a lot of skating going on.
But you could make the same statement about like lacrosse, field hockey. There was none of that at my school when I was growing up.
No, we didn't have the lacrosse. I mean, the girls had field hockey. They did that. But even growing up at my age, soccer was just starting to come on more and more.
What was the 50s?
It was not the 50s, but now, I mean, soccer, it's probably the most popular sport worldwide. But
I don't think probably you could take that out.
Yeah,
it is.
It is, yeah. But, here in the States, it just wasn't around as much when I was growing up. But now it's everywhere.
On October 22nd, 1989, just after 9 p.m., Jacob, his 10-year-old brother Trevor, and their friend 11-year-old Aaron Larson were biking home from a convenience store in St. Joseph where they had gone to rent a video. And we're talking 1989 here, right? This is kind of probably the height of going to rent videos.
It was the thing to do.
It was the only thing.
Well, it's true.
If you wanted to watch a movie that wasn't on, regular TV or HBO or whatever they had back then, you couldn't just go on a streaming service and get whatever you wanted.
That is true.
The boys were about halfway home when a man wearing a stocking cap mask and armed with a revolver came out of a driveway and ordered the boys to throw their bikes into a ditch and lie face down on the ground. Trevor recalled, per the Star Tribune, he had a mask. It looked like pantyhose on his head. He told us to get off our bikes or he'd shoot. We did what he said. We laid in a ditch and he asked our ages. According to Trevor, he looked at Aaron's face and he told me to run to the woods as fast as I could. He warned Trevor not to look back or else he'd shoot. Aaron said he told me to run too or else he'd shoot. Just before they began running away, they saw the man grab Jacob by the arm. Several minutes later, they came back to look around, but Jacob and the man were gone. And this is such a scary situation, Gibbs, when you're talking about, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds, to be confronted by a masked man with a gun. They're not out doing anything wrong.
No.
They're just riding their bikes home from the video store.
It would just be so scary.
Yeah. Absolutely terrifying at any age, but especially, you think at 10 or 11 years old. And then for the two boys to come back and realize that Jacob is gone.
But in one sense, you have to think, man, they didn't take me.
Yeah, that's always a tricky situation, though, because I think for most people, there's a real dichotomy there of, okay, I survived, I escaped, whatever the situation is, but then you hear about survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to kick in at some point. Investigators identified an earlier case with a similar MO to Jacob's abduction. On January 13th, 1989, 12-year-old Jared Shearl was kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and threatened by a man in Cold Spring, Minnesota, about 10 miles from where Jacob was abducted. The perpetrator used a gun and, upon releasing Jared, told him to run and not look back, or else he would be shot. So I could see why they would put, these two cases possibly as being linked. The MO is very similar. Local police, the FBI, and the National Guard launched a massive search effort to find Jacob. Police received thousands of tips. And by October 1990, about 2,000 people had been interviewed.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the amount of work that goes into these types of massive searches, now you do have a lot of different agencies involved, but it's just a massive amount of work. Although Jacob's case remained unsolved, investigators never stopped searching for answers. And I can only imagine what, Jacob's family was going through. And we talk about it in a lot of cases, especially a lot of unsolved cases, because, people disappear and the family is left to deal with that. And obviously it can be an easy situation at all. On June 30th, 2010, authorities searched a farm in rural St. Joseph. Jacob was last seen at the end of the property's driveway. According to KSTP, investigators searched the farm at least twice before.
So this is the last known location?
Yeah, so it does make sense, right? That's going to be somewhere that they're going to concentrate, the last place that he's thought to have been seen. On July 1st, crews began digging and hauled away truckloads of dirt. But let's keep in mind, this is over 20 years, right? 20 years has gone by.
Yeah.
When they're doing this, the owners of the property were Robert and Rita Rassier, who were in their 80s. They lived there with their son, 54-year-old Daniel Rassier, who was home the night of the abduction. He told the St. Cloud Times that investigators had interviewed him numerous times, and he submitted to a lie detector test, hypnosis, and DNA sampling. He maintained he had nothing to do with Jacob's disappearance. But if you think about it, he would have been, in his early 30s when Jacob went missing. He lived at the residence. So, yeah, you could see why he would, at the very least, be on police radar.
Well, if that's the last place he was seen, you kind of got to look at the people that live around there.
But then you have to think, right? If this guy had nothing to do with it, what would it be like to live for decades with people thinking that you possibly abducted this, young boy?
I think it'd be tough in any city, but if it's a smaller city, the rumor mill, it's going to keep running, and that's not going to be good for you.
No, it's definitely going to change your life, right? In a myriad of ways. Sheriff John Sanner told the Times that Daniel Rassier was a person of interest. So, that's published in the paper. Back on June 30th, Patty Wetterling told NPR News that she learned of the search that morning, adding, "I don't honestly think there's any break in this case. This is just what you do. You have a cold case. You go back to the beginning over and over. And I think there's some other people way back at the beginning that they're also going to be checking out." And I would say that is true, right? In a cold case, you kind of have to go back and look everything over, check a lot of things out that have already been checked out. But what else can you do?
Yeah, you're trying to decide if something was missed.
Patty said the Rassiers lived there at the time of the kidnapping and had been farmers for decades. She said they're wonderful people. It's got to be really painful for them as well.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about, right? Daniel is being called a person of interest. Tough on him, also tough on his parents. In September, the Stearns County Sheriff's Office reported that lab testing on materials gathered at the farm did not produce evidence. In May 2014, investigators confirmed they were taking a look at a series of attempted and actual child molestations that occurred in the Paynesville area before Jacob's abduction. 5 teen boys were attacked between the summer of 1986 in the spring of 1987, but no one was ever arrested.
I mean, 5 teenage boys.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're someone in that community, I could see the fear level rising. Amateur investigator Joy Baker brought the information to light. She found the 5 cases, conducted some research, and interviewed some of the victims. She believed the perpetrator could be connected to Jacob's case since the Painesville attacks occurred just 40 minutes away. She also believed that the attacks were not random. The suspect knew who the boys were and assaulted them at night near their homes. He usually wore a dark, puffy jacket and face mask. And for me, this is, one of the interesting parts of this case. You have all kinds of agencies looking into the abduction right off the bat. But as we know, the case went cold.
Right.
Then you have cold case investigators, right, who are combing back through the file, interviewing people. And then comes along an amateur investigator.
I mean, for the family, I'm sure they're happy that anyone is still investigating this.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Did you know that parents rank teaching financial literacy as the toughest life skill? That's where Greenlight comes in, the debit card and money app made for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and track spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn how to earn, save, and spend responsibly, while parents have peace of mind knowing smart money habits are being built with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/trygreenlight. That's greenlight.com/trygreenlight.
On October 28, 2015, 52-year-old Danny Heinrich was arrested and charged with 5 counts of possessing or receiving child pornography. And then it was just the next day that Heinrich was named a person of interest in Jacob Wetterling's disappearance. This guy, Danny Heinrich, is a former National Guard member who also had a criminal record. He got his first DWI in 1982 when he was 19. In 1984, he was convicted of breaking and entering into 2 businesses. He claimed he was looking for cash after he lost money gambling.
The old, I lost some money gambling. I got to go get me some cash. I'll just break into this place and
take it to replenish my stash. In 1986, he received another DWI. He attempted to run from the arresting officer and punched and kicked the officer to try to get away.
Well, that never works out well.
No, it doesn't. But it, said that all of these charges were misdemeanors. And I was kind of shocked by that because for as many body cam videos as I watch, which is a lot, right, on YouTube, I've talked about it on Patreon a lot. Nowadays, punching and kicking an officer, that's a felony. That's battery on a law enforcement officer. So, maybe in 86 it wasn't. I was just kind of shocked to hear that was a misdemeanor. Heinrich was in the National Guard from 1982 to 1991 and was honorably discharged. So obviously all of these convictions happened kind of while he was in the National Guard. So apparently that didn't have any effect on him serving.
But I would have thought that it would have.
Yeah, me too. I was surprised by that. He worked various factory jobs and filed for bankruptcy twice, most recently in 2011. Heinrich was actually interviewed by the FBI on December 16th, 1989. He claimed that he couldn't recall where he was on the day Jacob disappeared. So getting back to what we said very early on, right? Here we have a guy who becomes a suspect in the disappearance of Jacob Wetterling. And then it turns out that he was on the radar of authorities, in this case, most definitely the FBI, very early on.
Yeah.
He's interviewed. He says, well, I don't know where I was that day. But then it's like, okay, what happened after that? Was there no follow-up or it just wasn't reported on? It's not known. I'm not sure. He was interviewed at least twice in 1990 and provided a DNA sample. So it's great that he provided a DNA sample, but it was 1990. And we know the limitations that they had with DNA back then. In January of 90, Heinrich gave the FBI permission to take an impression of the tires of his 1982 Ford Explorer.
I mean, he's very forthcoming.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's because, he volunteered all of this. Was he compelled to give some of this up? That part I don't know. If it was voluntary, maybe he was just so confident that, the technology wouldn't catch him. I'm really not sure.
Well, I believe if, he probably was thinking that if I'm cooperative, maybe they'll move on.
Yeah, maybe. The thing that was so strange to me was that, so they take these tire impressions, and it was said that tire marks in a gravel driveway next to Jacob's abduction scene had very similar marks. Okay. It's not good.
It's not good.
Now, similar is not very conclusive sounding, but his right shoe also corresponded in size and design to a shoe impression from the Jacob Wetterling case.
Well, that makes it a little bit more difficult to say, well, it wasn't me. If they have my similar tire tread, now they have my similar shoe size and shoe design at the house.
Yeah, obviously, I think the more things that start to connect someone, right, the more police would be looking at them. But FBI agent Shane Ball cautioned in the document that an exact match would have to be based on unique characteristics of the shoe, such as a scuff, wear mark, or divot, and no such unique markings were present.
So basically, you can say he might have been here, but we can't
say for sure.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. Authorities searched the house in Painesville, where he lived with his father. They found 6 photos of children, including one depicting a boy in a towel, exiting a shower, and another of a boy in his underwear. But incredibly, Gibbs, no charges were brought at that time.
But it seems concerning.
It does. And I don't know if back then that didn't rise to the level of child pornography. I mean, it's certainly more than concerning. And we're assuming, right, this is not a family member.
Right.
This is not a photo of like his child. If this is a complete stranger, okay, that's very concerning to me. In February 1990, Heinrich was arrested for the abduction of Jared Shearer in Cold Spring, but was released without being charged. There just wasn't enough evidence for a conviction at the time, but Heinrich remained a suspect in both cases. So I feel like this guy is just skirting, right? Jail time. He's on the fringe. He's very close to the cases, but they just can't put enough together to really, get a conviction.
Well, up to this point, he's been really lucky.
Yeah, I would think that's another way to look at it. In the summer of 2015, authorities decided to take a new look at Jacob's case, and they analyzed Heinrich's body hair samples from 1990. The DNA evidence linked Heinrich to the abduction and assault of Jared Shearer. In January 1989, his DNA was found on Jared's sweatshirt. Okay, so we've talked about some things that didn't make him look good, but, wouldn't be enough for a jury, right, to get around reasonable doubt. This DNA is getting, to the heart of it.
Well, that puts him with Jared.
Which I would think would be a very big deal, because the assumption is he would have no reason, right, to have been around this kid. 8 days later, on July 28th, 2015, authorities executed a search warrant on Heinrich's home in Annandale. Authorities found 19 binders containing child pornography and even more on his hard drive. Some of the children in the images were known to law enforcement as victims.
Wow, this is so gut-wrenching when you think about that someone would be willing to keep a collection like this.
Yeah, it's always hard to talk about, but you have to get a sense of who this individual was. Heinrich also had VHS videotapes that he shot from a hidden location. that showed boys riding bikes at playgrounds.
So creepy.
It's creepy, but I don't even think that's illegal. You're allowed to take video of people in a public place. Now, we know it's creepy.
For sure it is.
There's no way around that, but I don't even know if that's illegal.
But was he doing this for some enjoyment later? Or was he?
Well, absolutely he was, because he also had a bunch of child pornography.
Yeah.
If that's all he had, I don't know if they could have used just that, right, against him. But that coupled with the child pornography, it's not too hard to figure out what he was doing.
Do you wonder if he was using those videos for his selection process?
I would say there's a really strong case to be made for that. Although there was no evidence officially connecting Heinrich to Jacob Wetterling, he did have news reports about Jacob and other missing children per KSTP. Now, you could argue, a defense attorney could argue he's a true crime buff, or he's interested in helping to find missing children, right? Everything in a vacuum can be explained. But when you've got child pornography, it's pretty hard to make those arguments.
Almost impossible.
Yeah, I mean, you could still make them, but who's going to buy it? Heinrich moved from Painesville to Annandale after Jacob was abducted and lived in his dad's basement. His father died in 2002. Neighbors said Heinrich was a quiet man who was meticulous about his yard. When authorities searched his house, Heinrich told neighbors things were going to get crazy. He told neighbor Megan Champlin that authorities found child pornography, but she didn't have to worry because none of it involved her children. He also said authorities were trying to connect him to the Wetterling case.
Oh, don't worry. I got this thing with kids and pornography, but not with your kids. It's okay. Don't worry about me being your neighbor. That does not add up to me.
No, to me neither, and I don't think anybody listening, but does it go to his mindset that you could even tell somebody that? They caught me with a bunch of child pornography, but you don't have to worry about it because it doesn't involve your kids. Who would not worry about it?
Exactly. I would be like, either he's going or we're leaving.
And then also this admission that they're trying to connect him to the Jacob Wetterling case. Why would you just come out and say that? In the months that followed the search, Heinrich continued going to work at a factory. Megan wondered what became of the rape. Understandably, Gibbs, she was unsettled, right, by the news of Heinrich's October arrest because their neighborhood was full of children. And what parent wouldn't be out of their mind with worry after finding this out?
Of course.
After Heinrich was named a person of interest in Jacob's case, the Minnesota Star Tribune reported on court documents that referenced an assault cluster in Painesville involving 8 victims within a mile of his home.
He's going to naturally look guilty on those.
The perpetrator was described as a heavy or pudgy white male in his 30s, between 5'6" and 5'9". Heinrich was described as a white male. His physical description in the late 80s was 5'5", 160 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes.
So not a tall guy.
No, and normally you wouldn't think 160 pounds would be described as heavy or pudgy, but at 5'5", maybe it would be.
Yeah, it could be.
Unfortunately, although Heinrich's DNA was linked to Gerald Sherrill, the statute of limitations had expired in that case. And I know that's something you and I have talked about a number of times. It's so wild for me to think that, the statute of limitations could expire on something as heinous as that.
Yeah, it just doesn't ring right with me.
In November, Jared spoke to CBS, expressing his hope that the identification of the attacker would help investigators determine what happened to Jacob. For years, he saw similarities between their cases. And we mentioned the MO, right? It was very similar, down to, being told to run or, you'd be shot. The difference in the two cases was that, Jared got away or was let go.
Right, right.
Jared described how he was forced into a car and assaulted in the back seat. The man threatened to kill him and then let him out of the car. He always wondered why he was let go and Jacob wasn't. And there's that survivor's guilt.
Exactly. That's going to haunt you for a long time.
Yeah. And I actually saw an interview with Jared, and he was very, open and frank in discussing what happened to him, which can't be easy to do. After Heinrich was arrested, the media reported that he and his brother were sexually abused as children by a guy named Dwayne Hart, who was a convicted sex offender and was dating their mother.
Not even safe in their own home. But we've heard this before, right? Where the perpetrator had this terrible thing happen in his past that kind of made them who they are.
Well, there are some people who are abused who go on to abuse. Obviously, not everybody does, but I think it's probably safe to say that this was something that happened in his childhood that did negatively affect him and, as you said, make him who he was, or at least influence what he would later go on to do. It's pretty hard not to make that connection.
Yeah.
Heinrich's parents divorced when he was 15. Around that time, his mother started dating Dwayne Hart. Hart was arrested in 1990 for molesting dozens of men and young boys. Author Robert Dudley, who wrote a book about Jacob Wetterling's kidnapping, turned in his notes from Hart to the FBI. Hart admitted in those notes that Heinrich's older brother was one of his victims. Family friend Steve Herding told CBS it was well known that Danny Heinrich was also molested. Dudley noted in his book that Hart was attempting to help investigators find Jacob's kidnapper and brought up Heinrich's name as a likely suspect as early as 1990. Heinrich apparently asked Hart how to dispose of a body.
I just find it weird that Heinrich is comfortable talking to Hart about how to dispose of a body. I mean, this is the guy that, according to him, abused him.
Yeah, it does seem very strange. A June 2016 court filing described why Heinrich was considered a person of interest in the Wetterling case. The filing detailed similarities between the kidnapping of Jacob Wetterling and Gerald Sherrill and a string of sexually motivated assaults of young boys in the Painesville, Minnesota area in the mid to late 1980s. According to the memorandum, it has long been believed that the Cold Spring and Wetterling abductions were likely to have been committed by the same person. The abductions were committed in the same geographic area, involved similarly aged boys, were committed by a lone male suspect, and occurred within months of each other. And for me, Gibbs, I don't think you have to be Benoit Blanc to figure this one out.
No, I do not think you need to be.
Now, you wouldn't know for sure, but to think that they're related, I mean, it's almost just common sense, right? Heinrich decided to cooperate as part of a plea bargain on September 1st, 2016. He led investigators to a burial area in a pasture near Painesville, about 30 miles from where he lived and a short distance from his residence in 1989. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension recovered human remains and Jacob's clothing. On September 3rd, Jacob's family announced the remains were his. Authorities confirmed the identification through dental records. His mother, Patty, told KARE at the time, "All I can confirm is that Jacob has been found and our hearts are broken. I'm not responding to any media yet as I have no words."
The emotions behind that, we finally know what happened. We finally have our child back. But worst case scenario, he's dead.
Yeah, obviously it's not the outcome that they wanted, but they do have information as to what happened to him. And, as we've heard many times, right, the not knowing. People say that can be the worst thing for some of these family members. On September 6, 2016, Heinrich agreed to plead guilty to one count of the 25 federal child pornography charges brought against him. He also agreed to testify to the details of the Wetterling abduction. In exchange for his plea and testimony, prosecutors agreed not to charge him with Jacob's murder.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is. My only thought is that they had to give up a lot, right, to get his cooperation, which maybe in consultation with the family is what they wanted, right? They wanted to know what happened. And there was a couple of ways it could probably go. They could not take anything off the table and he would just decide, hey, I'm not going to tell you anything. Or they could take quite a bit off the table and he would agree to tell them exactly what happened. And it sounds like that's the deal they made because they're taking quite a bit off.
They really are.
He's not going to be convicted of murder. He's only going to be convicted of one of the 25 counts of, child pornography. I think that right there just tells you how much they wanted his cooperation.
Well, I mean, the family now knows what happened and they have the body, the remains.
And you just wonder how much input they had in some of those, charges being dropped. At a hearing in the U.S. District Court, Heinrich testified that he handcuffed Jacob, put him in his car, and drove away. Jacob asked, "What did I do wrong?" And if that's not enough to just break your heart, I mean, we already know what ultimately happens to Jacob Wetterling.
Yeah.
His life is ended. But to think about him in this car being taken away and asking, what did I do?
Yeah, what did I do wrong that I'm here with you?
Heinrich said he drove Jacob to a gravel pit near Painesville where he sexually abused him and shot him twice. He panicked when Jacob cried after the assault. He said he avoided the police by listening to a police scanner.
With technology, it's great that you can have a police scanner and listen in, and sometimes it's fascinating. I had a buddy that had a police scanner. You could hear all that kind of stuff. But then you have the other side of it, right? You kind of know where the police are.
Well, I think that's the same with anything. Technology is great, but someone is always going to use it in some type of nefarious way. Heinrich said that he left Jacob's body and went home and then returned to hide the body. He used a bobcat to dig a hole. He returned to the site a year later and moved the body after he noticed that Jacob's jacket was exposed. So that's telling me that this guy was going back there. I don't know, on what interval, but he was going back to the site.
And we've heard other killers do similar things, right? They like to go back to the site, brings them some weird sense of joy.
Yeah, some emotion or
Yeah.
sometimes it's sexually motivated,
Yeah.
which it could have been in this case as well, as sick as it is to think about that. During the hearing, Heinrich also admitted to kidnapping and sexually assaulting Jared Sherrill. Patty Wetterling thanked everyone who worked on the case and said, as quoted by NPR News, "Jacob, I'm so sorry. It's incredibly painful to know his last days, his last hours, his last minutes." And that would be for a parent. To know what happened to your child right before and while their life was ending.
Yeah.
But, that versus the never knowing what happened to them, I can see both sides of it. There's no easy road, right, to travel.
Yeah, it's all rough all the way around.
She added that Jacob taught us how to live, how to love, how to be kind. He speaks to the world that he knew, that we believe in. U.S. Attorney Andrew Luger held a press conference after the hearing. When asked why Heinrich killed Jacob, Luger said authorities believed he panicked after seeing a police car nearby. He also said that given Heinrich's volatile and unpredictable nature, there was limited time to reach an agreement that would allow them to find Jacob's body. Heinrich was open for the moment to tell us what happened. Danny Heinrich was ready to talk, and we had to grab the moment.
They're right about that.
Well, so it goes back to kind of what we were talking about, right? They gave up a lot. They took a lot off the table, but they felt like they had to, or they would miss their chance and would never be able to get the information. So, I mean, it's a calculated decision.
But I think it was the right decision.
To ensure that the family knows what happened and to get all the details. Because it's not like he's going to go scot-free.
Yeah.
But there is, a real sadness for me in the fact that he's not convicted of Jacob's murder. Even if he spends the rest of his life in prison, there's a bit of injustice, I guess.
Oh, I agree. But at least he's in prison.
So for me, and you hear this on a lot of television shows, they really did have to make a deal with the devil, right? And that happens quite often. On November 21st, 2016, Danny Heinrich was sentenced to the maximum term of 20 years for receipt of child pornography. State authorities said that they would seek his civil commitment as a sexual predator at the end of his federal prison term. Now, 20 years being the maximum, right? That's a long time for having child pornography. And I'm okay with that. You send them away for as long as you can.
Right.
You have to believe that the maximum was reached because so much was taken off the table. Because in the grand scheme of things, 20 years is not near enough for all of the things this guy did.
No, I agree with you. I think at the end of the day, they should run that 20 years all the way out.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I would think there's a good chance he will be. Let's say he would be granted a parole hearing.
Yeah.
Hard not to think they would take all of this into account, right? The fact that he murdered this 11-year-old boy. Now, he wasn't convicted of it, but everybody knows about it. How could they not take that into account?
Yeah, I would think they would say, hey, you got a pretty good deal on the front end. So on the back end, you're pulling it all the way out.
Yeah, there's no extra deals, right? Heinrich said per NPR News, "I'm truly sorry for my evil acts that I have done against victims and their family, and the shame I brought on myself and my family, the suffering and pain they have spoke about today. I will always remember. Mr. and Mrs. Wetterling, the heinous acts, the selfishness are unforgivable for what I have taken away from you." And I just always wonder, how much of that is real and how much of that is the perpetrator just kind of knowing what, the court wants to hear, the family wants to hear.
I think there's a little bit of play there.
Yes, I probably more often than not, maybe a little bit of both. Sometimes I think it's just sorrow for being caught, right? Being incarcerated more so than it really is feeling bad for, number one, what they did, or number two, what the family's going through. Patty Wetterling told the court that Heinrich hurt my heart and soul and every fiber of my being when he murdered my child, the son I carried for 9 months and raised for 11 years. Jacob was a boy with many gifts that were never realized because of this murder.
Well, yeah, his life was cut short.
Yeah, we don't know, what he would have gone on to become, what he would have done. And I can't help but feel for his family and, his mother, what she's saying. It's very moving. I mean, there's no way around it. Judge John Tunheim said, "We won't pretend that this crime and sentence is about child pornography. It's also about changing the lives of so many children and parents who prayed for Jacob's return and also feared you coming out of the dark. Every child knows the story of Jacob Wetterling. You stole the innocence of children in small towns in the cities of Minnesota and beyond."
The judge was right in his statement. This was life-changing. He changed the lives of these kids, the kids' parents and the neighborhoods around.
And even, I would expand it further because the story of Jacob Wetterling became very well known. Probably for many, it was a cautionary tale about being safe, right? So many cases that you can think about, but this was a big one. This was highly publicized and stuff like that.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of when I was growing up, when the kids up in Michigan were being abducted and murdered.
Oh, the Oakland County child killer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a scary one for sure. While it is possible Heinrich could go free 17 years from the start of his sentence, Judge Tunheim told him, "I think that it's unlikely that you will, because this crime is so heinous, so brutal and awful that it's unlikely society will ever let you go free."
Good. Hope society doesn't let him go free.
But I don't know how they would keep him past the 20 years. Or is he just saying ever, meaning during that 20-year period?
Yeah, it must be during that 20-year period, because how else could they keep him in there?
Now, they did say that they were going to seek a civil commitment as a sexual predator at the end of his federal prison term. So I don't know exactly what all that involves. What I do know is that if there's anything that any law enforcement agency could probably do to extend his time or to never let him out, I'm sure they're looking into that. If they could figure out a way, they'll do it.
And I hope they do.
Because he deserves it. Let's face it. This man does not deserve to get out in 2036. Who in the world would want this man living in their neighborhood, walking their streets? Nobody does.
No, not one person.
Jacob's parents, Jerry and Patty, formed the Jacob Wetterling Foundation, an advocacy group for children's safety. In 1994, the federal Jacob Wetterling Act was passed, which was the first law to institute a state sex offender registry. The act was later amended by Megan's Law in 1996 and the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act of 2006.
All other well-known cases.
Yes, and, obviously a very good thing, right? A sex offender registry. For me personally, I think it's very important that these individuals who have committed these types of crimes against children, especially, have to register. They should be known. You should be able to look up and see if someone like this is living in your neighborhood near you so that you can take the necessary precautions, whether that's telling your kids, hey, you can't play on this street, or deciding to move because you've got 5 people who have been convicted of crimes against children who live in your subdivision.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way it should be. You should know as much as you can about where these individuals are. And I don't know, have you ever looked at one of those sites?
I have.
Yes,
It's scary how many dots show up like in the city you live in.
Yeah.
Because I don't live in a very big city. So that's a scary thing. My thought is, when you commit crimes like that, you give up some of your rights to privacy. In 2008, the foundation became the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, which educates the public about child abductors. In September 2018, Jared Sherrill was awarded $17 million in damages. In his civil lawsuit against Heinrich, the judge noted in his order that Heinrich got away with kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. This judgment is the only punishment Mr. Heinrich will ever receive for assaulting Mr. Sherrill.
Only punishment.
Yeah, he wasn't charged and convicted of anything having to do with that abduction and sexual assault. Now, $17 million is a great award, right, in a civil lawsuit. But what are the chances that, he's going to get much of anything from this guy?
I mean, he's in prison, right? So maybe Maybe you can take away all his canteen funds.
Maybe. Who knows? But at the very least, it has to be satisfying to get something on record.
Right.
That there's a punishment for this man who did such a terrible thing to you.
And now this man that did these terrible things is locked up, has no financial resources. So you have done about as much damage as you can to him.
And to your point, if you can take away even one packet of ramen from this dude,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a victory. The judge also noted that Jared's efforts to pursue justice led to the case being reopened. In an October 2017 court hearing, Jared described how on January 13th, 1989, he was walking home alone from a cafe when Heinrich pulled up alongside him and asked for directions. Heinrich got out, grabbed him, and forced him into the back seat. He warned Jared that he had a gun and he wasn't afraid to use it. He drove Jared to a remote area, assaulted him, and then let him go. He warned that if police got close to finding him, he'd kill Jared first. And that, for me, goes back to, kind of the theory that the reason why he killed Jacob Wetterling was because he saw police and got scared.
And thought he needed to go ahead and tie up loose ends.
Jared suffered from nightmares and fear that the perpetrator was still out there. He also felt that law enforcement didn't believe him. In an interview on December 11th, 1989, investigators accused him of knowing the perpetrator and said another boy was missing. And that's pretty rough. I mean, this was a kid who had been abducted, assaulted, and now police are accusing him of not telling the truth. They're basically saying, you know who this was, but you're not telling us. The lengthy investigation and his inability to receive justice took a toll on Jared. He was often distracted, which made working difficult. His ex-wife testified that his pain and compulsion to solve the case led to their divorce. She said Jared struggles to trust people and is overly protective of their children. And I would think it would be hard for somebody who experienced that to not have some of those thoughts.
Have all that trauma.
Makes it difficult, right? To trust people. How could you not be overly protective of your children when this happened to you?
I can see how that could be tough on relationships.
The investigation into the attacks in the 1980s was heavily criticized, with many people raising concerns about why law enforcement never linked the attacks to the Wetterling abduction. The judge noted in his order that the attacks were so well known in Painesville that the attacker was named Chester the Molester. And we've already said, right, that Danny Heinrich fit the description.
Right.
You had the shoe imprint. You had the tire marks. You could see why there would be criticism.
Sure.
That month, Stearns County Sheriff John Goodmanson delivered an assessment of the errors among law enforcement that allowed Jacob's killer to remain free for decades, even when the evidence pointed to Heinrich. Heinrich was arrested in February 1990, but FBI profilers concluded after an interrogation he was not involved in the abduction.
Wow, they got that one wrong.
It's a big error. Goodmanson called the interrogation the most fatal flaw of the investigation. And I could understand that, right? If you have these trained FBI profilers who are telling local law enforcement, hey, this is not your guy. Okay. Are they going to look at him a little differently after that? And I would say the answer is yeah.
Yeah, because you're going to put a lot of weight behind what the FBI tells you.
Goodmanson also suggested the roles of seasoned investigators from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension were minimized when the FBI took control. He said the investigation went off the rails. He noted that it wasn't just on the wrong path, it was on the wrong freeway. His review of the case file convinced him Heinrich should have been the prime suspect from the start. He bore a strong resemblance to the man who attacked boys in Painesville and Jared Sherrill. Heinrich registered as deceptive during a polygraph when asked questions about both the Cold Spring and Wetterling abductions. He evaded early police surveillance by shutting off his car lights while being followed, which, according to Goodmanson, should have set off alarm bells. Well, I think if you're following somebody and they turn off their car lights,
it really should set off some alarms.
It should. Dwayne Hart, a known child predator from Stearns County, later told investigators that in October 1989, the month Jacob was abducted, Heinrich asked him how to get rid of a body and showed him a gun. But according to Goodmanson, much of the early legwork was squandered when Stearns County lost control of the FBI, which created an investigative vacuum where witchcraft, voodoo, hypnosis, and other unconventional tactics were taken seriously. The result was that Heinrich stayed out of investigators' view. And I can imagine that some of this goes back to the 1980s satanic panic, hysteria type situation. Did they think, all right, this is not a lone guy, this is some kind of satanic cult?
Well, probably wasn't too hard to box it in that way.
Former FBI agent Al Garber called Goodmanson's analysis unfair and said that when they had to release Heinrich in 1990, due to a lack of evidence, he remained convinced he was the suspect. So you got some different views here.
Yeah, two sides of the story.
You have someone from local agency saying, the FBI kind of screwed us up. And then you have the FBI saying, no, we didn't. This guy never left our radar. We just didn't have the evidence. So could it be a little bit of both? Maybe.
It probably is.
As we wrap this one up, Gibbs, after 27 years, the murder of Jacob Wetterling was finally solved with the help of advancements in forensic technology. I think what's unfortunate about this case, and there are a lot of things that are unfortunate, but one specifically is that Heinrich was not officially charged and convicted of Jacob's murder. Although authorities are certain he was the perpetrator based on his crimes and pattern of behavior. It's very possible that Heinrich committed numerous acts of child sexual abuse in the 1980s and 90s that investigators have not even identified. And you know me, I always believe that things like that are possible, right? You have these people who it's proven they did some really horrible things, whether it's being a murderer, whether it's being a child predator, a rapist, whatever it is. It's hard for me to think that a guy like Heinrich didn't have a much wider swath of crimes and damage.
Yeah, when you're that bad of an individual, you would have to think that there had to be more than that.
But it's not always easy just to connect it all together.
No.
I mean, it took 27 years to, connect him to Jacob. But no doubt, I mean, he was just a really bad guy. You go back to the volume of child pornography that we talked about. Now, ultimately, that's all he was ever convicted of was the child pornography. But he admitted to murdering Jacob after abducting him and sexually assaulting him. And then there was the abduction and sexual assault of Jared. So, in my book, like I said earlier, this is a guy who may have only gotten 20 years, but I know for a fact there's some agency that right now is trying to figure out, okay, when this guy comes up to be let out, what can we do? What can we tack on? What can we charge him with then to maybe ensure that he never gets out? Because this is a guy that I don't think should ever walk the street again.
Yeah, I don't either. He needs to stay exactly where he's at.
But that's it for our episode on Jacob Wetterling. We got a voicemail. You want to check that out?
Let's hear it.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Alicia calling from San Antonio, Texas. First-time caller, long-time listener. I was calling in reference to a case I would like for you guys to cover. It's about the Bayou Strangler, Ronald Dominique. And he killed about 23 young men across the Southeast Louisiana region. And I remember this case particularly because two of the young victims I actually knew. Hair braiding was popular back when Bone Thugs and Harmony was popular back in the late 90s. And my mom used to braid one of these guys' hair. He would come over to our house. And I remember when he went missing. And then another young man, we actually used to play with in the neighborhood. We were the same age. And I remember at school that day, they offered counseling when they found his body. But anyway, it's a pretty gruesome thing, but I would love to hear you guys cover it. I love the way you cover the cases, the detail you put into it. Of course, how respectful and how funny you guys are. I'm laughing all the time. But anyway, thank you. Keep your head on the swivel. I appreciate everything you do, and keep your own time ticking.
All right, Alicia, thank you so much for the voicemail. So it's interesting. We have actually had him on our list from the very beginning. And I don't know if you remember, Gibbs, but in the first year we were doing the podcast, we kind of had a run of Louisiana cases.
We really did.
And we actually said something to the effect of, oh, we need to back out of Louisiana for a little bit. And I think that's where he got left off, and we've just never come back to him. But he is a really nasty, prolific serial killer. So we do need to put him up the list again.
Work our way back to him.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.